I think the biggest thing for me and Katie as we've gone through this is you got to keep the family aspect and the family dynamic. And we're not going to let anything try to tear that apart.
When my boys started playing sports, it wasn't a matter of anybody being left out. It was logistically almost impossible.
It's a danger point when your kids' sport dominate your family life.
My kid's competing for a starting spot on this really good travel team. If they don't go to every single practice, then they're going to fall behind.
It's almost a lie you're believing that my daughter or son has to do this or this is not going to happen.
We're not going to sacrifice holidays for sports. Holidays are family time.
The rest doesn't have to be actual rest. It's just more of a mental rest. I think just letting them play as opposed to having that structure.
When are they getting a chance to rest? When are they getting a chance to just watch a college football game, watch an NFL Sunday football game?
As parents, don't just get caught up in the whirlwind. Be intentional. Think through what your priorities are.
Before we get to the podcast, if you have middle school or high school kids that play sports and you don't want to fundraise like me, we got you covered. My buddy Chris Carneal owns Booster. Chris?
We help schools and sports teams raise funds in a super fun and engaging way. In fact, the last 22 years, we've raised $750 million, and we can't wait to help you. Choose booster.com.
Welcome back to Pure Athlete. I am Jeff Francoeur with Britt and Brad. I am in Cleveland. What's up, guys?
How you doing, Jeff?
Hey,
it's
man.
been a long time.
Man, I'm telling you what, it has been a roller coaster ride. I've had 2 weeks of 5 games with Cleveland and Detroit.
Yeah.
And as we're doing this morning, I just witnessed one of the greatest baseball games that I've ever been a part of as a player, as an announcer. Game 3 in Cleveland last night was incredible, guys. It really was.
It was incredible to watch. And you guys, by the way, did a phenomenal job calling that game. And BA was, his excitement, went both ways, but he really captured the moment there at the end, and you guys as well.
Well, and so this was my thought from it, right? Because we could break it down and talk about it forever. I mean, we're going to do it on the Open tonight for Game 4, but think about this. Baseball is the only sport where you can have unknowns really do what they did last night. Like you think about in basketball, Michael Jordan's not giving it to the 9th guy on the bench with the game on the line. Tom Brady's not, he's throwing it to Randy Moss, right? He's not throwing it to the backup tight end in the corner of the end zone. And you just think about all the guys last night. John Kinsey Noel, who tied the game, he hasn't squared up a ball in a month. I mean, literally has not hit a ball hard in a month. And he hits it off Luke Weaver, who hasn't given up basically a hit in a month.
I know.
And he crushed it.
Emmanuel Clase, the best closer in baseball all year, gives up 2 home runs in 74 innings. And he gives up back-to-back homers to Judge and Stanton. And then the guy that's on the mound that gets the wins for the Guardians, Pedro Avila, he wasn't even on the roster in the ALDS, and this guy's out there pitching in the 10th inning with their season on the line. So, it was a great game. It had all the moments, and I tell people all the time, like, that's why you do the postseason for baseball. I love doing the Braves. I love doing regular season games, but when you have a moment like last night, we literally went out after to a Mexican restaurant and just decompressed, and we talked over and over for 2 hours about how that game went, how it could have gone. It was incredible. And to see Cleveland like that,
what was the city like?
It was incredible. You think about the Cavs won it all in 16. The Guardians lost in the World Series that year to the Cubs. Really, for the last 8 years, they have not had much to cheer about. I mean, we can talk about the Browns, and they don't want to talk about the Browns here. So to see that moment for that city last night again was it was one of the best games I've ever seen.
Well, you did a great job. You've done a great job all postseason. I've texted you a couple times, and I don't give a lot of compliments to you, but I did. I said, man, y'all did a great job.
Well, thanks, guys. Well, with that being said, Britt, what do you have in store for us today?
Well, it's probably not as exciting as last night's game.
Well, let's wait. Let's see what happens. You never know.
But it's pretty relevant, I think, for really, every family. we're going to talk about this topic today that's we're kind of calling balancing the family needs in the midst of this crazy youth sports culture. And you say, why are we talking about this? And again, it's because every family has to deal with this. And depending on how many kids you have, you've got kids who are younger when their older siblings are in the midst of youth sports, or you've got kids who are older and their younger ones are in the midst of youth sports, or you got kids that aren't athletes at all and their siblings are. And it's like, as parents, how do we balance all that? And so that we're not giving all our attention to one or two of our kids and the others feel left out because they're not doing the thing that, that mom or dad, really kind of loves. And, so, it's all of that. And we just want to spend some time today talking about that. Because again, it's one of those topics that if you don't realize it going in and go in with intentionality, it can bite you before you realize that you've been heading down the wrong track. So I thought a good way to start would be for us to personalize this a little bit. And Brad, you and I are, we're finished with our youth sports journeys, and so I thought I'd start and just ask you, did you wrestle with this?
We wrestled with it in a lot of different ways, and when you have a lot of kids, there's different seasons that you kind of go through in this journey. Early on, my two oldest daughters were in theater and musical theater and plays and things like that, and so my boys got dragged until all their dragged. That sounds like a negative connotation. My boys had the opportunity and the joyous opportunity to see them in all of their shows and
they got dragged. Okay, let's call it what it is. They got dragged.
Yes, there was a lot of whining and gnashing of teeth, but it got but really when my boys started playing sports, it got crazy. It almost got, it wasn't a matter of anybody being left out. We had 4 at the time, and it was a matter on Saturdays. It was logistically almost impossible. We had 4 kids doing activities almost on it one day. Like we'd have to get grandparents involved. And so at the start, it was more just about how are we going to divide and conquer. And we would tell our kids, hey, you're part of a big family. Somebody's going to be at your game. It may be a grandparent, maybe one of us. It was rare. Like when hearing Matt and Leslie Holiday talking about the whole family getting on the plane or getting in a car and going to watch their oldest one's tournaments. We never really, we did that for plays because it was easier. But in terms of practices, in terms of games, it was just trying to figure out how to logistically do it. When my daughters got a little older and my boys we had 6 and my boys were in the heart of all their sports activities, it did feel there was to me a tension because I was spinning. It's kind of like my wife was handling the drama stuff and I was handling the sports stuff. So I felt like we weren't doing a lot of family stuff together. We were still dividing and conquering, but I was always with the boys. And every once in a while she would try to see a game or a match or whatever. And then as my older son Daniel kind of graduated out of sports, then and Brady got really serious. I felt like I was just spending so much time just with him at the detriment of some of the other kids. Now, that all being said, I think there was a lot of intentionality to where I would never miss a play. I would never miss a recital, never miss something at school, but just it felt like constantly every week I was at a tournament. I was at a practice, or I was out at a lesson, something like that. So I definitely think it was, in our family, it was not anything that like verbally, I think, came out. Maybe later on the kids, after counseling, they may bring it up to me, but really during the time, I felt as a dad, I felt like, man, it's just, it seems a little bit out of whack.
For us, it was a constant struggle. And last night, my daughter and her husband are here from Michigan this week, and we were talking about the episode last night, and my daughter's like, "Don't forget to ask about this or talk about this," and I'm like, I feel like I'm taking some arrows, and but it was a constant struggle, because my 2 daughters were older and they had kind of finished sports when my boys got really into it, and so there was a lot of making sure that. That I wasn't, 100% focused on sports. And at times I didn't do that well. But we'll talk more about that as we go through. Jeff, you're in a different place. I mean, you've got your little guy who's hasn't really started yet, and then you've got 3 more, and 2 are really in it, and one's just beginning. And are you already seeing some of the pitfalls and danger points that can happen?
Yeah, for sure. And we said, I think the biggest thing for me and Katie as we've gone through this is you got to keep the family aspect and the family dynamic. And we're not going to let anything, try to tear that apart. For me, I've been gone for 2 weeks now. And the kids came and saw me during fall break, which was incredible. We spent 3 days at Cedar Point amusement park in Sandusky, Ohio, which was awesome. But it hit, like, for me the other day, Katie's kind of been a single mom for 2 weeks with the kids, and Braden had lacrosse practice, and she had been on the go every single night. And she called me at like 5 o'clock, and she was like, "Braden's got practice at 6. I can't go. Like, I need a night at home with the kids, dinner, bath, early bed. Like, we have gone nonstop." And it just, like, the realization, like, the part of me was like, man, he's got to be at practice. He's got to do this. And then the other part was like, they need a night, right? Like, because Braden's been dragged to Emma Kate's practices, to Ellie's games. And, so the other part of me was like, look, I could tell by Katie's voice, I could tell by the kids, everybody was kind of at each other and worn down. And so that's why I was like, yes, skip practice tonight. Just literally, y'all stay home, have dinner, do this. And it was so funny because the next day, everybody was happy. They were in good moods and stuff. And it was just like, okay, there's times you need to make what's best decision for your family. And I'm not saying you got to skip all these practices and do anything, but we've had different stuff. Remember Julie Foudy, when she was on here, talking about her daughter going to homecoming instead of playing in a soccer game. And I just think sometimes we need to take a step back, right? And make sure our priorities are in order, and especially at the young ages.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's dig into that a second. What are the danger points, when this gets out of whack? I'll throw out a first one. It's a danger point when your kids' sports, dominate your family life, and they crowd out any of the other priorities. And some of those priorities you would say, if you step back, you would probably say they're more important, but sports end up crowding it out.
Yeah, you don't want the dinner conversation always to be about, especially if it's just one kid, but a couple. Like, you don't want it to always be about, okay, let's talk about soccer today, or let's talk about what I'm at practice, where the other kids are just sitting there, kind of feeling like they're second fiddles. Yeah, you don't want it to dominate your conversation in the car. You don't want to be feeling like you're always talking to that kid. Even though you're kind of feeling like you're going through that journey with that kid, you're sitting at practices, because especially before they can drive, you're at everything, whether it's lessons or practices or games. But you got to be intentional about, being engaged with the other kids if you have multiple kids.
Yeah, I think so. And I think some of the pitfalls, right, as you just talked about, is the kids going every which way. They're never getting rest. They're never getting proper sleep. Let's talk about it. They have school. They have homework. They got all this stuff that is just equally as important, and even set a precedent, right? Like my dad, I remember, used to, as much as my dad loved sports, if we didn't finish our homework or have something done, like, there were going to be consequences for it, because that was just as important. So I think when you put all your eggs in the basket, right, and you're running 100 different ways, like you said, especially when you have multiple kids, you got one kid, it's a little easier. Hey, we'll all go do this as a family. But when, again, Saturday for us, we got 2 lacrosse games. We have a softball game for my daughter, and we got my oldest daughter, her first softball tournament now for the fall. We got the next 3 weekends in a row. And so it's like divide and conquer, right? And then Sunday, Katie had already said, like, we're going to church, we're coming home, and we're relaxing for the day. And, whether one kid has this or that, like, that's what our plan is. And so I think that's important, right? To put those limits on it, where it's like, Saturday, we're going to be at the field all day. We know it. We're embracing it. We're rolling with it. But Sunday, we're not doing anything.
Yeah. And that's like you said, that's another thing. Another danger point is, how do you want your kids to have, you want to commit to a team, you want to commit to your kids, they've committed to going to practices and obviously participating in games, but where does sports lie in that priority? And there's always, people always say you can tell someone's priority by the time they spent in it. And I'll just, being transparent. I mean, I could say during the heat of those seasons that sports was not as important as some things, but I'd be scared to add up the hours that I spent in a week, dealing with that stuff. And so and again, it may also be a sliding scale based on the age of the kids. If it, like we're watching the Olympics, and you're seeing just how much the families' lives were dominated by a swimmer, driving them at 5 a.m, an hour to swim practice, whatever. Well, that kid, they probably knew that kid had a shot to make the Olympics. And so there may be some, you may want to have to make some adjustments for that. But if it's like Jeff's kids' ages,
Yep.
them missing a practice at 11 is not the end of the world. Maybe, they're not going to, you're not going to miss a high school practice, because you're not going to say, hey, we just want some family time tonight. He's missing practice tonight. That's not going to happen. But before high school, and they're not going to be, maybe some sports, maybe gymnastics, but nobody's going to be on the fast track to the Olympics at that age to where everything needs to stop for them. And so it's where is it lie?
Yeah, I love what you said, Brad, because I think it's age specific too, right? Like, and we keep talking about that. When it's 16, 17, 18, I'm not saying don't go all in, right? If you're a basketball player and you need to go play in an AAU tournament, and this is going to help you, like, I'm all for that. I think, again, like where I'm at with my family, guys, and with my kids' ages, you realize what's important, right? Like, you realize, okay, by Braden missing a lacrosse practice, he's not going to John Hopkins to play lacrosse, at 9 years old. Like, you got to let that develop. Now, again, if you make a commitment to a team, you need to be there a lot. But again, you can have a day or two that's, hey, you know what? Today's just not going to work.
Yeah.
I think some of the pressure, Jeff's kind of alluded to it, but what if your kid's not like the star of the team and your kid's on a really good club or travel team? There's pressure there for that kid not to miss a practice because there's a concern, well, if my kid's competing for a starting spot on this really good travel team or this really good club team, if they don't go to every single practice, then they're going to fall behind. What do y'all think about that? I mean, if you're the star, you can probably get away with missing a few practices. But if you're scratching and clawing to kind of make the starting lineup or be one of the key kids, what do you think about that?
I mean, I just think it's hard. This is just a tension that as parents you have to manage. And as you said, as they get older, it becomes harder because commitment, matters. But you just got to do, at the end of the day, your sports goals have got to fall up under your parenting and family goals. And if something gets pushed, you have to make that decision on what gets pushed. And again, it's easier when they're younger, although I guarantee you there's some parents listening right now whose kid is in 9-year-old travel ball who's saying, I can't, we can't miss anything.
Yeah.
But what are the real consequences at younger ages of missing something? If you got a coach that says you're off the team or you're on the bench because you missed something when you're there 98% of the time, then maybe you need to find a different situation.
You know what situation I see a lot, guys, and I don't love it, is the amount of kids that are playing football on Saturdays in the fall and are playing a travel baseball tournament all day Sunday after that. And my question is, when are they getting a chance to rest? When are they getting a chance to just watch a college football game, watch an NFL Sunday football game? But they're doing it almost every weekend. Like at a young age, like you said, Britt, a lot of Braden's buddies who are 9 years old, they're playing football on Saturdays. And then they're playing 4 or 5 baseball games on
Sunday
Sundays.
only tournaments.
But you know why they're doing it? They're doing it because we're saying multiple sports is a good thing, but they haven't let go of this thing that says, gosh, if I don't play baseball year round, I'm gonna get burned.
And that's the lie that you're believing, right? Like I don't know any other way to say it. I'm not saying don't play in one tournament. You want to do it once a month or something and it does it, but these kids are doing it all the time. And that's what I think we keep talking about on here, right? It's almost a lie you're believing that my daughter or son has to do this or this is not going to happen. And I think, again, we can say the amount of athletes we talk on here, the amount of athletes that we know, I could have missed 10 football practices in high school, and I was still going to be the best receiver and best DB on that field. Like that's just the thing. I'm not saying you can't get better by doing it, but we talk about it. God touches some kids, and it's like, you're doing this and you're doing this. Like you said, Brad, maybe at 12 years old, you realize my kid's going to swim in the Olympics someday. And they might be the outlier that they're just better than everybody else and can do it. But I think what's best for my kid. And I think we get away from that sometimes.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's really about them being tired. I think like if you had a kid that played football on Saturday or played even like a baseball tournament on Saturday, on Sunday, it's okay for them to go out there. If you let them go outside, they're going to go play. They may go play sports, which would be awesome. They may go play soccer. They may go play baseball in the cul-de-sac with their friends, but it's not an organized, structured, you got to be there for batting practice at this time. It's just play. They may be exhausted. They may just want to lay on the sofa and watch, the NFL on Sunday, but they still probably, it's okay. They're still maybe have the energy to go out there and play, but it's not like, hey, we got to be at the field here. We're going to play 5 games on a Sunday only tournament, for whatever sport it is. And so the rest doesn't have to be actual rest. It's just more of a mental rest. I think just letting them play as opposed to having that structure. Oh, we got to win something this weekend.
So let's talk about, starting at the top, we touched on the family priorities and what are non-negotiables. We get asked that, at times. How is a mom and a dad, do we set our family priorities and establish these things that are non-negotiables, and strive towards those things? It doesn't mean you do it perfectly, but how do we strive towards those things, and where does sports and where should sports fit in that priority? I think that's a huge thing. And I think there's too many parents and families that don't, with intentionality, sit down and talk about, these are our goals as a family. This is what we want to have happened when our kids are 20. This is what we want to have happened in their lives. And what are we going to do now to ensure those things happen? And set priorities around that.
I'll let Jeff go first.
I know this for me, like growing up and how me and Katie are trying to do it, was Sundays are a day where we're home a lot as a family. And look, there'll be a few times in the spring where you would have a baseball tournament or softball tournament that would carry over into Sunday. That's going to happen, right? It's like we talk about, going to church. There might be a Sunday where you have a tournament that you miss church, but not every weekend and not every other weekend. And so, we try to do it where Sunday we're home as a family. We're having family dinner. We're doing all this stuff. Saturdays, we have come to the agreement that Saturdays we will be everywhere which way with our kids. If it's lacrosse and 45 minutes away, softball an hour that way between grandparents, we'll get them there somehow, right? And there will be a parent or grandparent there to support you during your game. But we try to do it where Sunday we're home, and then try to do it where Thursday night is a night at home for us with how our schedules fall for what we do. So we try to make it where 2 nights a week we have family dinners and can kind of talk, the kids can watch Bluey after while we do dishes, whatever they want to do, but that it's a night for our kids to just kind of chill, recharge their battery, and get them ready.
Yeah, I don't know if there's such a thing today as non-negotiable in terms of your schedule, but I think you have to be, like Jeff said, I think and what he said, I think is what a lot of parents' goals are during these seasons. It's, okay, can we try to have 2 dinners, that we make at home, that we sit around the table together, that, we're not running around grabbing fast food or grabbing Subway or whatever. And then the Sunday thing, I think you have to, it's really, I think, the conversation you have with your coach before you join a travel or club team. It's like, if you really want, and it's really, really hard, and I'm not going to say I was successful at it, but if you sit there and, hey, we're going to join this travel team, but man, we're not going to make every Sunday tournament. And if it's, it's sad to say this, but like, yeah, if we're competing for a championship, maybe we're going to be there. But if we're in the losers bracket and we're just playing out games, I mean, I'm just being honest here, but then we may not be there, or we're gonna try to make two out of two tournaments, 2 Sundays, a month. It's not, but it's really, you can have, I mean, I respect the folks that have non-negotiables. They go into it saying, my child's not going to play on any Sunday, or we're not going to miss a family dinner or whatever. And so the coach just has to deal with it. If that kid's is talented enough, that coach probably will. But I think it's more about intentionality, just trying to set goals to try to hit those goals that week.
And I'm glad you said that, Brad, because remember what Mark DeRosa said, there's a team for every boy or girl out there. And so I think about it, right? If you go up to a coach and say, hey, look, we'll be there on Sundays, but it's going to be after church. We can play if the game's at 12:30, 1 o'clock later in the afternoon. And if their plan is to play every weekend out of town doing this, then you know what? That might not be the team for you. And that's okay. I mean, there's plenty of great teams that play Saturday tournaments, and the coach might say, look, come after church. And then you know what? You might find a right team. But I think that's where, as parents, we have to do a good job of finding the right team for our kid.
Yep, that's right. I mean, and that's another thing that you have to think about is if you find the right team where your kid really, really is having a great time with those kids, and a great time with those coaches, it's not going to be as much of a stress on that kid to go maybe play on a Sunday with them. If they're not enjoying it at all, they're not going to want to play with any day, not just Sunday. But you have to try to be aware and watch that. And now once you've committed, you have to do it. But like during tryouts and during things like that, keep an eye and seeing like, is this going to be something your kid's going to really enjoy? And then maybe you can do more of it. But that's part of the process.
Yeah, I agree with the whole idea of, can you really have non-negotiables today? You have priorities. And I don't know, I think back, I mean, my priorities for my kids and our goals for our kids were, was spiritual grounding, was at the top of the list. And then and then our family, I wanted my kids at 20 years old, when they didn't have to spend time with their family, to want to spend time with their family. So we wanted a family dynamic that the kids wanted to come back and wanted to come home. And so you have to cultivate that. And so if you're only spending time with a couple of the kids, and then it's hard to cultivate that. So we had a hard time with dinners at home. When we got into heavy season, dinners at home were hard, but we met at places, and even if we were at a fast food place, we sat there for a while. But we didn't have to prepare, and we didn't have to clean up. And so that was nice. Church was hard. And I think when my boys were in their mid to upper teens and they're playing a lot of tournaments, and we tried not to play more than 2 a month, and most of the time we didn't. But, in tennis, it wasn't about a team. It was just individuals. So you could pick and choose your stuff. But, I'm sure I didn't always make the best decisions and all that.
Well, it's a different sport too. Like tennis and golf, it's a rank. Like you're probably gonna, if you're in that situation like your boys were, where they're trying to get a scholarship, and the way it's being decided on, the coaches are looking at their ratings, or looking at the top tournaments they played in. You just have to do that. I mean, now, other sports you may have more leeway. It may be more subjective to a coach to they don't have to be, they're not having to go qualify to get certain type of rankings and things like that. It's definitely, like for football, being a 3-star or 4-star subjective, but in tennis and golf, they've got to play in certain tournaments to get points, or they're not going to be looked at by coaches. But again, like Jeff had said earlier, it's the age. When your boys were 11, then you can sit there and go, it doesn't matter that we're not going down to play in Orlando in this tournament. But when they're 15, 16, they need to.
And you can also make adjustments, Britt, right? Now with the way that, church is online all the time. I mean, if it's one of those things, hey boys, we're going to watch this sermon together, and then we'll do it. But showing as a parent the importance of that in your life too, and not just, hey, it's Sunday, we're letting it fly by and we're not doing anything, right?
Right, no doubt.
So I think that is a big key too.
So let me throw this out because I know parents wrestle with this, and we had the holidays on. I wasn't there, but you guys interviewed Matt and Leslie, great interview, and their oldest Jackson, who's now with the Orioles, and their next one is Ethan, and he's doing all the big travel. But they did big travel, and they have two younger kids. And their deal was we're gonna keep our family together. They're all gonna travel together and go to each other's stuff as much as possible, and so on and so forth. If you got 3 or 4 kids, and I mean, is that, how practical is that? Should you strive for that? Kids are going in different directions. You talked about, we have to get grandparents involved. How do you keep the family close when everybody's doing different things?
I mean, I think that the other thing too is the question that came to my mind is we're talking about, well, like your younger two are probably pretty talented and they probably are, on teams. So you're basically saying we're going to kind of put their sports
talking about the holidays,
right? On pause while we go travel which sounds awesome. He's traveling to different great cities and exploring cities and going on field trips and stuff like that. But it may be like those kids may be getting a later start.
Yeah.
Because they're taking them with them. Or they may share the holiday DNA and they can get a later start and still be fine when they hop back on their team later on. And some of us don't have that. So, I mean, I think it's it's so much easier if you've got one kid or two kids, but for big families, man, it's just, it's just reading the room, reading your family, see like if it's kids that have more freedom and they want to go on those trips and be a part of it. I know that, like I talked about, my boys didn't love going to a lot of plays. My younger girls, because we had like 2 and 2 really, and so we had 2 younger girls. They spent a lot of time in the bleachers, with coloring books and dolls and stuff like that, and sometimes they had to come. Because it was, but they didn't love it as a lot. They weren't huge baseball fans or soccer fans or track fans, and it's just one of the things you got to kind of watch.
I think for us, we just took the tact of hey, we're a family, we're going to support each other. Now that doesn't mean you're going to be at everything, and you don't have to be at everything, but the big things, you're going to be interested in, and you're going to, and whether you're there or not, we're going to talk about your stuff and your stuff and your stuff. If my daughter's in a play that has 4 performances, you're going to be at a couple of them. And that seemed to work pretty well. I think one of my daughters would tell you, we didn't talk about her stuff as much as we talked about sports. And that was always a challenge for me. But anyway, Jeff, you were going to say something.
No, I was just saying, I think we tried to do, Britt, what you talked about. We were going to support each other as a family as much as we could growing up. I walked numerous golf tournaments with my brother and my mom and dad, walking 18 holes, watching them. I was at almost all of my sister's basketball games. And then she went on to play Oglethorpe D3, which is in Atlanta. So I was at probably half her games whenever I had an opportunity to play, or for her to play. And you know what? It always, I think, was great because I always remember when they both got kind of done and I was in high school playing football, Parkview, and baseball, like they came back for a lot of my games. And I think, they were very supportive. And that's the reason that the 3 of us are very close to this day, I think, is because our parents made it a priority for us to be. Now, I'll say this. Matt and Leslie are very blessed. They made a lot of money in baseball, and they would tell you that. They have the ability to do that. A lot of families don't have the ability to pay for 3 more kids to fly to Jupiter, Florida for a weekend. So you got to get a little more creative. I know this. I told you, like I've told my daughter, I'm coaching her travel softball team this year. This is it. This is the last year where I'm the head coach for her travel softball team because I told her I got to coach our other kids the same way that I coached you to give them every opportunity. And I think it's important for me to coach my kids at a young age because I want to develop them. I want to develop their love for the sport, teach them the fundamentals. And then as they get older, right, there's other coaches that can do that and they don't need as much instruction. So that's kind of how we've done it. But I've said it, like there's numerous Saturdays that our younger kids have been there, but it's also, for Emma Kate's whole tournament, but it's also why, like, when Braden's got a lacrosse game, on a Sunday at 4 in the afternoon, you bet your butt Emma Kate, whether she wants to go or not, you're getting in that car and you're going with to support your brother. And it means a lot to each other. They might not say it at that time, just like I'm sure me, my sister, my brother did. And I know this, man, I sat through like 7 of my sister's piano recitals. And that's why Brad, earlier when you said drag, my dad had to drag me and my brother to those things. I mean, it was like, I'm like, you used to get there, right? And you'd get the list and you're like, oh crap, my sister's not till 19th out of 21. And you're
I know.
And my dad would sit there to me and my brother and be like, you sit your butts right there, and it's like, yes, sir. And you know what? But at the end of it, we'd be there for 2 hours and we'd support my sister. And she would tell you it meant a lot to her that we were at something that she was passionate about, even if we weren't, right?
Yeah, you're making deposits in the future relationship for sure.
Yeah, that's true.
For sure. I had a situation that I'll throw out there as encouragement to some other parents that, I coached my boys in baseball and basketball and everything when they were little, up to a certain age. And my middle daughter was playing middle school tennis, and the coach was a lady named Coach Cargo. You know her. She's awesome. And she needed an assistant coach, and she came to me and said, will you come assistant coach the boys and girls middle school team? And I was like, oh man, I don't have time for that. It's a pretty big commitment and so on and so I just can't do it. And she came back to me about a week later and said, I understand all that, and I respect it, but this may be the one chance you have to coach your daughter in a team, and you're coaching your sons in all these teams. So I just would challenge you to really think about that. And I did. And I said, you know what? She's exactly right. And I went and coached my daughter in those teams that year. And I was so glad I did that. So I think it's another area where, Jeff, you're doing it well. Your oldest is your daughter and you started off coaching her. But I think sometimes we can jump into coaching the kids who really are into sports, and the kids who just are doing it for fun. We kind of let them do their thing, and they miss the benefit of their parent coaching them early on.
100%. And they miss the benefit of, I've told you this, like if Braden wanted to play baseball all the time, of course, I'd love to coach that. But when he did lacrosse, he's loved it the last 2 years. And I volunteered to help. Like I said, I don't know a thing. These coaches are yelling, do this, but I'm helping out, right? Like I'm the hustle coach. I'm telling the kids to run, get off the field. But I want Braden to know that is a priority, just like coaching my daughter in softball, which is my sweet spot. But at the same time, it means the world for me to be there for him. And so he knows that, because again, that's what my dad, I told you, he coached my sister and helped out in basketball when he would tell me, look, of course I knew baseball. I knew what to do, but she needed to know that too.
Well, that's a sweet story, Britt. But I think if you really were the level of parent that I think we strive to be, you would have probably volunteered to be involved in some of the theater stuff that your daughters were in. I think that would have really shown them that you really love them. If you could have helped.
I built some sets.
Well, I'm talking about like vocal stuff and maybe some choreography. And I mean, I think if you really want to take it to the next level,
I should have.
You stayed kind of in that tennis space. But I mean, if you really wanted to show your daughters you loved them, maybe get involved in some of the on stage productions. No, that's a great story, and that's a great point you make. And that, it's easy if it's something your kids like, it's what their priority is.
Yeah.
But if it's something that they're doing, and it may be the only time that she was going to play tennis, and you were there, and she's going to always remember that you were there and participated in that, and that means a lot to her, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, in all seriousness, joking aside, and I think your family's kind of done this too. My wife decided she was going to be the drama, the drama mom, and she kind of shouldered that load, and was, headed up the drama group and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of I was the front person on sports, but then we would all kind of come together.
Yeah.
And
That's
so that
usually
worked
the
out
way it works
pretty
out.
well.
Usually the dad's not on the drama side and the mom's on the
Well,
sports
sometimes
side.
you never
It could
know.
Be. It could be. Hey, I don't want
I could
to.
see
Yeah, I
you
don't want to
doing that.
stereotype. I don't want to
It can be
stereotype.
vice versa, but let's be honest, that crew does not want Britt in the drama side. You got to know your role sometimes too.
That's
Yeah,
very true.
yeah. I think that's a good. It's not a good
Very
look.
true. One other thing that I jotted down, when thinking about this, and I don't know, you guys can talk about it relative to baseball, but in the tennis world, there are big tournaments that would happen over Christmas, over Thanksgiving, and I would watch families go to those tournaments and take their families to those tournaments and play them because there weren't as many competitors playing and you could get more points and stuff like that. And now, again, this is all personal choice, but we decided early on, like, we're not going to sacrifice holidays for sports. Holidays are family time, and there's importance in holidays that support a lot of other things. And so again, I think it's a danger point for me when I see, consistently every holiday you're going to tournaments and so on and so forth. It's like, really? And I know that sounds pretty judgmental, but I just think that's something you ought to watch as parents.
That's the crazy thing too, is there's always going to be some type of tournament that is there's going to be an opportunity to play every single weekend of the year, even during the holidays. And that's just where, the most time it's tempting is when your kids are doing well. Like Jeff talked about, hey, listen, we're doing great. There's another let's play one more tournament. Let's play one more tournament. And I mean, I think if our two oldest were involved in competition cheer, and we did the whole Disney World thing a couple years, and that was fine because you weren't doing it on a Christmas day, but that was kind of the trade off to my boys. You got to sit through 3 hours of cheerleading, or more than 3 hours probably, but we're going to go to Disney World for 3 or 4 days as well. And so, but I would say unless there's got to be some pretty. It's got to be an amazing, opportunity for them to get drafted. That's one thing I think of, like playing on Christmas Day or Thanksgiving or Easter or something like that.
Yeah, I love sports as much as anybody. Thanksgiving and Christmas, man, I wanted to be home. I wanted to be with the family, wanted to be relaxing. But I do agree, if there is a reason that you have to go or it takes you, I will say, make sure you take your family. I mean, don't ever split that up for that day, right? Like that's too important.
Well, we could talk about this forever. It's good stuff. It's stuff that, every family has to wrestle with. And we just want to talk about it today just as a reminder that as parents, don't just get caught up in the whirlwind, be intentional, think through what your priorities are, think about all of your kids, not just your stud athlete. Or the one you want to be a stud athlete, and make sure you're balanced in your approach.
Yep.
I agree. And I'll finish with this. We love your feedback on this because I think this is such a great topic. And there's probably ideas that we're missing or that could be great ideas. I'd love to know it as a parent as I'm working through this with me and Katie. But I think more than anything, we want to be awareness of what you said, Britt. Like, there's not just one way to do it. There's different ways to do it, but make sure whenever you are deciding that the family aspect is always part of it. And I think if you do that, then you can feel comfortable with y'all's decision, whatever it is, but make sure that family aspect and being together as a family, because I've said it, the reason my brother and my sister and myself have such a great relationship is because we were there for each other at a lot of the stuff. And I've seen too many girls and guys that never went to their other brother, and I'm telling you, they're not as close. It's true.
It's a great way to end it right there.
Absolutely.